Welcome back. So in this video we're going to look at a couple of different ways a research question is, or research questions of this article are presented. Then we'll look at some kind of definitions of home-based employees versus home-based businesses, and we'll also address some of the stereotypes that this article brings up. So the research question kind of starts on page 5, and I'm going to read this because I think it's important. They point out a gap. They say, research is dominated by a focus on home-based employees, whereas much less attention is given to home-based businesses despite their numerical significance. So the implication is kind of like, well, we're going to talk about home-based businesses. Okay? And then they say another thing. They say there's a paucity of evidence on home-based businesses. So they're hinting that, yeah, that we're somehow going to have an exploratory study. It wasn't clear as I was reading. I think, okay, is this a research question? I don't know. But then on page 7, they articulate 3 research questions very clearly. And they say this. This is what they're trying to solve in this paper. First one is, what proportion of small business population operates from home, and to what extent does the significance of home-based business vary geographically? That's the first one. The second research question is, what are the characteristics of home-based businesses, and to what extent and in what ways are they different from other types of small and medium enterprises, or SMEs? And the third is, what is the economic significance of home-based businesses? What do you think about a paper that has 3 research questions? Make sure you put that in your comments below. So they give some definitions that I think are important. Home-based businesses versus home-based employees. And I'm going to read this because I think that's important. They say many of the issues of home-based working are common to both employees and self-employed, but there are fundamental differences. For example, home-based employees are linked to an organization, are managed, and have colleagues with whom they interact, whereas home-based business owners are independent and potentially more socially isolated. I guess the implication is that they don't have colleagues with whom they interact. Many home-based employees may only work for a portion of their time at home, spending the rest of the time at their workplace or on the road meeting clients and collaborators. Some home-based businesses employ other people. But are they more potentially socially isolated? I don't know, that's interesting. Home-based businesses are also more likely to have greater interaction with the local community to obtain advice, information, and business services which the home-based employee can access from their organization. The implication being that the home-based employee does not interact with the community. It is therefore important to make a conceptual distinction between those who run businesses from home and employees who work from home. And you can probably all relate to this home-based employee versus home-based businesses, right? Many of you probably do something called telecommuting, at least periodically, in your work lives. Those of you that are not entrepreneurs. You know, it's like the day you stay home from work and you, I don't know, maybe you answer emails or you work on a report or something, but you're working for a company, you're just doing it at home on that particular day or that particular time frame. In fact, with the coronavirus that's broken out right now, many people are telecommuting or working remotely. So these would be home-based employees. For example, the university where I'm employed now has pretty much moved everything to online. So many of my colleagues are doing their classwork, their class prep, and their teaching from home. So they would be home-based employees, not small or home-based businesses. Okay, so because they're telecommuting, just think of telecommuting. You have to remember this article came out in 2008. I don't think telecommuting was a big a deal back then as it is now. The home-based business, on the other hand, is an entrepreneur like any other entrepreneur, except they're doing their business out of the home. And in fact, it's kind of funny, many of the things that you see that they specify with home-based businesses, you can also generalize about many other forms of entrepreneurs as well. Just something to think about. Now, they address some stereotypes of home-based businesses that I think are interesting. And this is on page 6 for those of you that are following along with the article. They say that we normally think of a home-based business as a lifestyle or hobby-based business that is economically insignificant, run by women and revolving around childcare and household responsibilities. In other words, it's a prosaic enterprise. Let me give an example. I worked with a lady, and guess what she loved more than anything? Well, puppies, of course, right? She loved dogs and she loved animals. and she had a couple of dogs herself, and she had a lot of land, so the two dogs can run around. So what did she wind up doing? She wound up opening a kennel in her backyard. So when people would go to work, they could drop their dog off at her place. Their dogs could play with her dogs, and they had a big open space. And she wound up taking care of dogs basically full time so that her husband could keep down his job. That's kind of the stereotype that this article is referring to. Okay. They have another example of a stereotype, and they mentioned this in the previous video as well, but they say home-based businesses strengthen local economies through job creation and local linkages. They revitalize local neighborhoods. They increase safety and security. They reduce local economic inefficiencies. Okay, in other words, keeping people from being unemployed. They promote positive carbon balances, again, because people aren't commuting so much and they're not building new infrastructures. Therefore, the carbon balance is reduced. And importantly, they provide an access to work-life balance that they might not have otherwise, right? Because you are the boss, you can choose how many hours you wish to work or not. Now let's just take a couple of these stereotypes for a second and think about that. Comment below and tell me what you think, but how is that any different than any other kind of an entrepreneur? I mean, just think about this for a second. Entrepreneurs strengthen local economies. There's plenty of research for that. They definitely create jobs and local linkages. I don't think there's any dispute. I mean, in fact, entrepreneurs proportionally tend to hire more people than do large corporations. Sadly, it's because they're not always as efficient as a large corporation because of economies of scale and things like that. So they tend to be more manpower intensive. Revitalize local neighborhoods. Yeah, sure, a local entrepreneur could do that too, right? Again, paying income taxes. That money goes back to the state, pays for better schools, police. They revitalize their house. Maybe they employ some local people. A regular entrepreneur can do that, okay? Reducing local economic inefficiencies, so you can hire local people who are maybe unemployed or maybe not fully employed. Yeah, a regular entrepreneur can do that too. Promoting a positive carbon balance. Maybe a regular entrepreneur doesn't do that as much, right? Because they might commute to their place of business. Who knows? So I guess the question that I have for all of you watching is, what do you think? Is this really a distinction for home-based businesses or not? Yeah, comment below on that. Provide a work-life balance. Well, what do you think about this? Whether it's a home-based business or a regular entrepreneurship, do you really think that they have a better work-life balance? Or is it possibly because they're working for themselves, they might work themselves a lot harder? What do you think? Comment below. Now, one thing that's important, and they make this specifically about home-based businesses, but you can make this about regular entrepreneurs too. They enable people who are excluded from work based on social or physical reasons. And what they mean by this, again, you may think of, there may be, again, reinforcing the first stereotype, you may have a woman at home who has to care for children, and therefore she cannot dedicate enough hours to an employer. So maybe a home-based business can enable her to work a certain number of hours that she actually can work, and then she can spend the rest of the time employing children. Or not employing children, playing with children. Well, I don't know that that's unique to home-based businesses either. I mean, there's a restaurant down the road from me. It's run by a family, and I'll tell you what, I see those kids in that restaurant all the time playing. I mean, the parents are right there with the kids, looking after the kids. So I don't know that childcare necessarily means you have to have a home-based business or not. What do you think? Comment below. Now, for physical reasons, this can certainly be true, right? There are certain people who are disabled or have physical handicaps that maybe cannot actually get to a work location on a consistent basis, so a home-based business may be good for them. Another kind of disability that you might consider, there is a gentleman who lives down the street from me, and his wife has extreme social anxiety, and so kind of working on their family business is a really good fit for her because she doesn't, she deals with people, but it's mostly customers that she's used to and other members of the family, so that's a pretty good fit for her. But the thing that the article does not talk about, there are many other kinds of people that can be employed, but it's not just by home-based business. It can be by any enterprise, any entrepreneurship, right? When you think about people with criminal records, I mean, that's one of the last groups of people that face discrimination. They've served some sort of incarceration for a crime they've committed, and when they get out, they either don't have the education or the skills to get hired, or people are reticent to hire somebody with a conviction. Entrepreneurship of any kind, including a home-based business, may be a good avenue for them to get employment when otherwise they may not be able to. Retirees, they mention this a little bit later in the article. Again, with the fact that pensions are going away, the fact that Social Security will probably go away, there are a lot, and medical expenses, oh my goodness, are so expensive, and especially if you live in somewhere like the U.S. where a lot of your end-of-life care or your regular checkups for an elderly person can be very expensive. Working as an entrepreneur or in a home-based business can be a way to supplement your income. And then the final is very, very young people. You know, thinking about under 16, normally cannot get a full or part-time job. There's restrictions on child labor. However, with many family businesses, guess who's working right there alongside the parents? It's the children. Even I, you know, as a child, worked in my uncle's restaurant washing dishes, and that was a way for me to earn income. So this is also an avenue for employment, dignity through work, and discipline for very young people who can benefit from that at a young age. And then one thing that they don't talk about in the article until much later, which I think should be brought up here under the stereotype, is the importance of the cluster effect. When you have areas that have lots and lots of small businesses, small entrepreneurships, or home-based businesses, you have kind of reinforcing activities that go on. Let me give an example of the cluster effect that's at a very famous cluster, Silicon Valley, right? Silicon Valley, of course, is supported by Stanford University and some other universities in the area, so that provides some of the education, training, and intellectual capital for the area. But you've got so many small businesses that can support the big companies that it makes everybody better in the process, right? So let's say you want to start your own business and you go to Silicon Valley. Well, guess what? There are dozens of computer programmers who would love to work for you, you know, for the right price, that is. But they would love to work for you for the right price. There are technology, you know, shops. There are coffee shops where people meet up. There's co-working spaces. There's print shops. There's advertising. There's business graduates. There's every kind of employee with every kind of skill set who has started all these little small businesses all over Silicon Valley that can support small and large businesses alike. And because they're all kind of in close proximity, it's kind of one-stop shopping, right? You know, you can go to one area of Silicon Valley and you can compare the prices, the services, and the quality of a dozen computer programmers almost instantly. So it makes the markets more efficient, it gives you more variety as a consumer, and as a whole, it winds up making the whole economy grow even more. Okay? But again, this is not just a home-based business thing. You could say this really for any kind of entrepreneurial venture. So in the next video, we're going to talk about why home-based businesses have been growing, why this is kind of a new quote-unquote trend. I hope you like this video. As always, I ask you to give me a thumbs up. That's like a like. You can also subscribe and comment down below. I'll see you in the next video.